Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it, Hail Varsity, as we are presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Loaded show for you today as we get into Nebraska and Indiana. Before we lay out who's on the show, we need to address business. Business being Tuesday's show. And Tuesday's show, we posted a clip of Rick Kaczynski that's gotten attention locally, and it's gotten attention nationally. And just to comment on that real quick, guests are going to come on the show. We strive to have the biggest and best guests for you and say and share their opinion. We encourage guests to share their opinion, and that was done. That being said, what was shared and shared out was below our editorial standards and doesn't represent Hail Varsity as a whole. So that needed to be said, needed to be addressed as we move forward. Can send an email today, chris@hailvarsity.com. Numbers to get in. Can chime in at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. On the show, Brandon Vogel will join us, managing editor with Hail Varsity. Vogue's always with us on Thursdays. In hour two, the good doctor, Rob Zatechka, part of the pipeline, Husker great and Hall of Famer, offensive lineman. We'll get his take on what can happen moving forward for the Nebraska offense. Feel like it's going to be a lot of points needed Saturday night against Indiana. So can Nebraska's offensive line hold up, and what type of jumps and improvements can be made by the Big Red? They've had an off week to do it. Indiana comes in. I know statistically their defense is susceptible, but is Nebraska's protection and run game going to be up to snuff? Trev Albert's part of the Big Red Breakfast this morning. He had some comments when it comes to what they're looking for in the next coach and what are some pillars that need to be established for Nebraska football. Mickey Joseph also has the guys ready to go as he met the media afterwards. Gary Barnett with us in about an hour 15. We'll get Coach's thoughts on Nebraska, how things are going in Buffland, and the rest of the college football weekend landscape. Some NFL and college football thoughts. That is happening with Daddy Burke with VSiN Sports Network. Elijah, should be an interesting ball game Saturday night as we turn our attention to Nebraska, Indiana, and really kind of a crossroads moment for Nebraska. As you look at this season, 1-3, they need something good. They need something good to happen, and part of that can be improvement defensively. A lot of that can be just getting a close win, right? This program's been striving for one. To Indiana's credit, they have had a lot of close wins this season. 3-1. Cincinnati's good ball club, but tempo and pacing, right? We talk about it a lot in basketball, but you really feel like it is going to be a difference maker Saturday night with Nebraska and Indiana. And it's all about tempo and timing and what Indiana does, and that's crank out 94 snaps or, 3 snaps in under a minute is what they've been clocked out. It's impressive. And it likely in Big Ten football comes down to turnovers and field position and all that good stuff. Well, a number to look at for Saturday night is rushing, right? One hand, it's Indiana. What are they going to be able to do? They're shy of 100 yards per contest. They throw the football around quite a bit. But you flip it around with what Nebraska's allowing defensively. That's 233 yards on the ground. That's 5.7 a carry. The Black Shirts are trying to live up to that. Let's flip it around. It really, to me, kind of comes down to what Nebraska does offensively running the football, right? That's time of possession. It can be a short passing game as well. But what can you get? What production can you get from the run game? Gabe Ervin, can he carry over the end of the Oklahoma game with a lot of touches, presumably Saturday night? And what are you going to get out of Grant? And then can Nebraska run the football when they have to run it? We've said that a lot this season, but it's going to be interesting with where Nebraska needs to go offensively. We'll get to some of your calls in a moment, more your emails coming in. But with Nebraska's game plan, it will be to be balanced. Nebraska's game plan will be to hold the football. Nebraska's game plan will be to take a little bit of pressure off that defense.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with what you said last. That's offensively what the game plan is going to be. We know what Nebraska's weakness is within this team, and it's the defense. Nebraska's defense, they're weak defending against the rush, but they're really just weak stopping a little bit of everything. They've struggled so far this season, and the easiest way to game plan against or game plan around a subpar defense is to keep them off the field. And to do that, you have to keep your offense on the field. So that means, A, running the ball early, often with success. That means not turning the football over, not giving Indiana a short field. And then whenever your offense does inevitably have a drive that stalls out, you need to have it stall out after a couple of first downs. Get the ball to around midfield so you can go pin this Indiana team deep and say, yeah, you can run 3 plays a minute all you want, but we're going to make you run 15, 16 plays to get all the way down this football field if you want to dink and dunk us down the field. That's what it comes down to for this offense. And with as much as been talked about the defense the past 2 weeks, I do believe that how Nebraska wins this football game is with their offense. And what their offense needs to do is play complementary in a way that helps out the defense.
That's novel, right? Complementary football. It's been asked for, it's been required, and it's been missing.
And that doesn't mean that the offense has to go out and play a perfect game on Saturday for Nebraska.
You kind of feel like it, though, don't you?
But it's not that they have to play a perfect game. They just have to play well enough to not put their defense behind the 8 ball. This defense is going to have struggles this season. It's not like Bill Busch is going to step in there and wave the magic wand and fix all the ails of this defense. Simplifying and teaching can only do so much over a couple week period. It comes down to the offense not necessarily being perfect, but knowing that the weight of this game is on them, and if they don't perform, they're going to put their defense in some bad spots. And while you might get to the end of the game and say, well, the defense can't allow this many yards and still expect to win a football game, I think the offense will go into the post-game locker room knowing that they should have done more if it comes to that on Saturday. The offense, not perfect, but they have to make a step up from their performances against even the likes of Georgia Southern.
Who's on with the phone with us?
We got Brian on the line.
Brian, welcome into Hail Varsity. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. You know, I'm a longtime listener. Not a huge Nebraska fan, not a huge Indiana fan. A big fan of the Big Ten. I'm a big Ohio State fan. But, you know, I know you're going to get some calls about this today, about that current coach. I know you guys said it on the radio that, you know, that was an opinion he made. You know, it really kind of irritates me. This is the stuff that I'm talking about. You know, Nebraska, you know, they don't need this we're getting with what the coach said yesterday. You know, maybe instead of making that comment about a guy that, you know, does pretty much everything right in the program, is there for his kids, and then he goes out and makes a comment like that about another coach, you know, maybe instead of making comments about that coach, he should study that film a little bit harder. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks for the phone call, Brian. Yeah, comment in question was Tuesday with a former coach.
And that's why we want to do it, to address it, to lead off the show today, because I think, as we said, the comment does not reflect the overarching views of Hail Varsity or what we want to portray in this radio station. We want to bring the biggest and the best guests, Schmidt, as you said, and we want these guests to have their own opinion, but comment was out of line, and we wanted to address it to lead off the show.
So we get into the nuts and bolts of football, and we get into the magnitude of the matchup, the ball game, and where Nebraska's at. And listen, you can look at Indiana and where are they at, right? They're 3-1. They are really good at having a chip on their shoulder, despite their defense not being as highly ranked or as good as they've been in past years. They're really physical. I mean, at least I thought they looked pretty physical through some of the matchups. They fly around. They're pretty sure tacklers. They're fundamentally sound. And they'll do some work when it comes to getting a turnover or making a play or getting off the field. There's confidence. There's a number of kids on this team that won here in 2019. So they are going to come in ready to go. And one thing about Coach Allen is he's always found a way to motivate. And this team, no doubt, just bumping into them like we did at Big Ten Media Days, they're motivated about last season. They're motivated about 2-10. They're motivated about some tough losses that went sideways early in the season. They lost Penix due to injury, right? They had a special season. Think how many teams had really wow moments during COVID. And I think Nick Saban said it best after he won a championship. Out of all of his championships, out of all of his bling, one of the things that's special to him was the team that persevered through it in 2020. As messy as that was for so many people, you drill down to just the college football world, and that was a satisfying season for Alabama because they found a way to get through it with COVID, with distractions, with just no normalcy. And Indiana was one of those teams, too, that really rose up and persevered, and they got kicked off the right way with that thriller against Penn State. And, man, they just caught some fire and did really well. And you see what Penix is doing with DeBoer now at Washington. So Washington's looking like a class act in the Pac-12. So there's been a bit of transition. You had a tough year last year, and there's some question marks. I mean, I think I picked Indiana. We have to go find the Nixon tape. But I'm pretty sure I had Indiana. I was all in on Indiana last year to kind of follow up. They did not. But I think maybe they were a year away or so with this year. Now, how do they shake out in the East? I don't know. Because Penn State's pretty tough in the East. Michigan State looks to be like a team that's taken a few steps back this year as they're on a 2-game skid. Michigan looks ornery as ever on the lines of scrimmage. Ohio State can carve up anybody with their offense, and I think their defense is a little bit more physical, a little bit better with what they have from their new defensive coordinator. And then the West, brother, it's Minnesota right now. And then I think you have an elimination game this weekend with Wisconsin and Illinois. As we figure out what shakes out at the end of September and who's surviving in October, and then you've got that merry-go-round in November with kind of a round robin. You know, Nebraska still has opportunity. Indiana right now is 1-0 in the league, right? This is a road game under the lights. You know, the crowd's going to be nuts trying to help will this football team the right direction. But, yeah, when I say crossroads, it is. You've got a little bit of redemption and retribution on Indiana's mind with how their season went. And then you have Nebraska with Coach Joseph trying to get things flipped. And listen, you get a win against Indiana, that the kids need it from a confidence standpoint, but also to feel, all right, the season's still worth fighting for. And you get a win against Indiana, and then Rutgers doesn't seem so daunting because you lose tomorrow night or Saturday night. You got a short week. And then you go to Rutgers Friday night. Friday night games are crazy. They've been crazy for Nebraska.
And I don't want to sit here and say that if Nebraska wins this football game on Saturday, I still think they're in contention for the Big Ten West, because I think there's just too many holes in how this roster was constructed and what this team is right now for Nebraska to be a serious player for that. But I know I've been a negative Nancy on this show at times regarding the outlook of this season, but a win against Indiana, as you said, the momentum it can do with your season. I mean, a 5-win season, if Nebraska can get there this year, that's a huge win for the circumstances surrounding the program right now, and it starts against Indiana. But on the flip side, if things go the wrong way against Indiana, I might go straight back to being a negative Nancy, Schmitty.
You know, you just got to see some progress from the football program. And I think you're seeing that, at least from some of the changes made. Okay, what was there wasn't working before, so let's change things up. And Mickey's doing his thing on offense, and of course Coach Bush. Really, it's going to come down to can you play free, can you play fast, can you play physical, And can you play fundamentally sound? Who do we have with us?
You got Pete on the line up against the shot clock.
Okay, Pete, shot clock is on. Go for it, bud. Pete, you're with us. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hey, you're on. Go for it, Pete.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess my comment is, I think Bill Bush.
Pete, give us a shout back. We're losing you, bud. You're traveling, and you are caught in the wonderful. He's probably on normal.
Well, no. I know Pete is proud of his heritage in West Point, Nebraska, calling us from West Point. So
I said Columbus. Did I say Columbus, West Point, something like that?
I think Pete might be calling us back.
Yeah, we'll get to Pete. Pete, hang on the line. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to more of your emails coming up. But really, crossroads ball game for Nebraska Saturday night, and an opportunity for Indiana to kind of flex a bit as they're off to a 3-1 start. We'll spend some time with Brandon Vogel from Hale Varsity. Get more of your thoughts and calls coming up here in this first hour. Hour 2, Rob Zatechka, part of the Pipeline Husker Great, his take on where Nebraska can maybe exploit some things with Indiana. Dr. Rob was on Big Red Wrap-Up this week. Good stuff from him. And Gary Barnett joins the show. His takeaway on the week that's been for Nebraska. Hale Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hale Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hale Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. An hour away, Gary Barnett with us. Rob Zatechka will join us. Managing editor at his football office, Brandon Vogel, joins us at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. What lid are we wearing today?
We've got the classic Palace Diner lid from a small diner, maybe the best diner I've ever been to, which is pretty stiff competition because a lot of diners end up being pretty good, but a diner in Biddleford, Maine. So if you ever find yourself in Maine, message me and say, what's that diner I should go to again? I will tell you, Palace Diner.
See, and I hit this really cute little diner in Missouri. I'm trying to think of the name. Waffle House? You ever been?
Highway. It's free shout-out Thursday, so might as well. No, diners are awesome. I have yet to visit Maine. I'd go in the fall, but it is football season. And Vogue's hyperbole or crossroads? Do you look at it that way for both programs Saturday night?
I look at it that way from Nebraska's perspective, specifically. Like, you look at this, and for me, for somebody who looks at power rankings, maybe too much, maybe obsessively is the way to put it. Like, FPI and SP Plus, two ESPN power ratings, they make Nebraska a slight favorite in this game, which last I checked is where the line had it. And not in any others, not at Rutgers next week, which, these ratings change week to week. But I look at this and be like, yeah, feels kind of fair. And we look at this, I think I look at this personally from a Nebraska perspective. And I looked at the Oklahoma game this way too, and that didn't go well from Nebraska's perspective. But I look at it as like they've got 8 games left. They've had a lot of change. Like, who knows? Who knows what can happen? I really do think they've got a chance in a lot of these Big Ten games. It's just, if you look at this from a probability perspective, it's going to be a tough road to get to 6 wins. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but it probably is a tough road. And it's hard for me to see Nebraska getting to that point, getting to a bowl game, which I think is important for a lot of different reasons, but getting there is hard if you don't get one of these, because if Nebraska doesn't show it's drastically better than what we've seen through these first 4 games and then this 5th game, it's not going to be a favorite in any of the remaining games, and you got to do with that what you do. So it's a big one. It feels like a turning point to me, potentially.
Brandon Vogel is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, it's funny, and I can't remember, I wish I could give credit where credit was due, but I can't remember who said this, but somebody preseason called this game the battle of the buyouts between Nebraska and Indiana with what could be on the line and how things change in only a month for Nebraska with this one, no longer a buyout on the line. But on the other side, this is not just a big game for Nebraska, for Tom Allen and for Indiana. I mean, 4-1 looks a hell of a lot different than 3-2 does coming out of this game, just based on where he's at in his tenure at Indiana and what this season has looked like so far for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, so from Indiana's perspective, I mean, Tom Allen was on a good run. He made a bunch of good hires, got his 2 strength coaches hired away by Alabama. Kalen DeBoer is now doing good things at Washington after doing good things at Fresno State. And, you know, when I wrote about Indiana in the Hail Varsity Yearbook, where we preview all of the Big Ten teams, that was basically the question of, like, how much attrition from your staff can one program really take, particularly a program like Indiana, which I don't mean in any way disrespectful to them, but, you know, Indiana football is Indiana football. And he's had a great amount of success there. He made some really good hires and then lost those hires because they were having success. So how much of that can you take? And to his credit, you know, kind of entered this season, made some coaching staff changes like Nebraska did after last year, which it started with a ton of promise, didn't go their way, didn't go close to their way. And here we are. And I could look at Indiana from an objective perspective and say, well, that win over Illinois felt a little bit, you play that game 10 times, Indiana maybe wins it once or twice. Same thing with Western Kentucky, which Indiana won in overtime, but you can't get around the fact that they're 3-1. And when you pair it against Nebraska over their previous history, you know, it's been the sort of game that Nebraska comes up short on. So I'd honestly be surprised if Saturday's game doesn't end up as another close one. And if we're just being truthful about it, Indiana's record in those sort of games over the past 4 or 5 years is better than Nebraska's is.
The Bill Bush effect, what do you anticipate Saturday night defensively? I know it's going to be quicker, it's going to be simpler, it's going to be one-word calls. What can you get accomplished in a week? And how much do you go young? Because that, or at least have that option on the table. It's been talked about. Do you implement?
Yeah, I think you have the option on the table. And we saw one depth chart, at least movement, change, whatever the right word is there, with Malcolm Hartzog landing at that number 2 spot at cornerback. And that makes sense. I think at this point, all bets are off, and you need to look at some of those young guys who, you know, maybe don't know everything at this point, but bring a ton of effort or bring a ton of athletic ability. And to this point, like, knowing everything hasn't been the answer for Nebraska's questions defensively. So there's kind of no downside to being like, let's see if this affects some change. I think when I look at this game and how I expect it to play out, this may not be what anybody wants to hear, but I look at Indiana's approach to offense and see a lot of Georgia Southern, and we know how that went. That said, it was still a 3-point loss for Nebraska, so Nebraska's going to have to tackle well. That's something that, can you address that over a week to 10 days of having a bye week? But we'll find out. That's going to be a key, because this Indiana offense, they're going to run a ton of plays. They're going to do it quickly. They average more pass attempts than any team in the country at this point. And it's going to be a lot of horizontal. It's going to be a lot of horizontal passing, which requires you to tackle well. And that's, maybe that's an upside for Nebraska here, because that can be a coaching / effort thing. And coming off a bye week, Indiana's going into its 5th straight game. I think that has to matter a little bit.
Brandon Vogel is with us from HailVarsity.com and magazine, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Let's get down to third downs and rushing yards, right? Situationally, what does Nebraska do on both sides of the football, third down-wise? What's a good number, Vogues? And then, to me, it's going to be who runs for more yards. Indiana's offhand is running the ball, but Nebraska gives up rushing yards to about everybody, even if that's not your strength. So you counter that by letting the defense watch your offense. What's a rushing total for Nebraska?
Yeah, I don't know about a rushing total, but I think how Nebraska runs the ball in this game versus Indiana's defense, which has struggled in some areas, but is relatively strong against the rushing piece of this, decides the game. And, I can look at Nebraska's defense, and obviously they've got to find a way to get some stops, and that's big too. But if Nebraska can run the ball, I think they've got a chance to control things a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. On the I-80 Preview podcast this week, I thought Nebraska needs to be between 4.5 and 5 yards a carry. They were that against Georgia Southern. They were that against North Dakota. Weren't against the 2 Power 5 opponents they faced. So that's kind of the number to hit for me there. And I think they have the potential to do that. We've seen what Anthony Grant can do individually. I liked what I saw from Gabe Ervin, a guy who got elevated to number 2 due to injury or due to effort, whatever it may be. There's an injury there. We all know that. Mm-hmm. At that running back spot. So I feel like Nebraska has a chance there, and it's possible, like, if this just gets into a shootout. I mean, that Indiana-Cincinnati game was super pass-heavy on both sides, but if Nebraska's able to run the ball and have success that way, I think that's the clearest path to a win for the Huskers for me.
So, Brandon, it sounds to me like you're clearly throwing your hat in as a leader of the run the damn ball fandom side of Husker fans. At least for a week.
I'm throwing my hat at least next to the ring, because if you can run the football, it matters always, no matter what offensive style you have, what your tendencies are, what your strengths are. But for Nebraska in particular, and we've seen this passing game be pretty good, in my opinion, for really most of this season. I broad picture, I look at this and say, and I think you said it earlier, Elijah, Nebraska has an offense that I think can win at some games. It's just a matter of, can the defense get enough stops? And you look at the third down performance for Nebraska's defense in particular, and it hasn't been good enough. And Indiana offensively may not blow you away, didn't blow me away when I pulled up all the numbers to this point, but they've been good on third down. So I think when we flip this around, when Nebraska's defense is on the field, third downs are always important, but Nebraska's had a lot of them and hasn't gotten off the field often enough. Can that flip on Saturday? So between Nebraska's ability to run the ball and Nebraska defense being able to get off the field on third down, those are the 2 biggest aspects of this game in my mind.
It's Brandon Vogel with HailVarsity.com and magazine managing editor, also author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. Get that book. Vogues, real quick, what's coming up from Hail Varsity?
Yeah, so we'll obviously have the Indiana match covered. Nebraska volleyball is on the road this week, but we'll have those covered as well. We got into a little bit of basketball. Jacob Padilla had a great story today on Maggie Mendelson and how she is bridging. She's our Deion Sanders / Bo Jackson. Take your pick, whichever one you prefer as a 2-sport athlete. But I thought that was a really, really good story that went up earlier today. So definitely look for that if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, we're getting into it with the start of basketball.
Folks, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Hail Varsity, we're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Numbers to get in at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Mickey Joseph talking with the media a little bit earlier. So the good news from Mickey is improved tackling. That's the word after practice today. You have the coordinator change. You have defense, says Mickey, in a good spot right now. And we just spent some time with Brandon Vogel. We'll have Dr. Rob Zatechka, former Husker standout, part of the pipeline. He'll be with us. We'll get his take on the lines of scrimmage moving forward. Gary Barnett with us as well next hour. Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. So missed tackles have been an issue for Nebraska. I will not dive into the specifics through all of the ball games, but they've been double digits. They're in the 50s total, and Nebraska has to get better that way. You get better by repping it, just cutting some things out. Elijah, we had Matt Millen talk to us yesterday with his film study. He's like, well, Nebraska's not fast. And I think Nebraska fans are used to seeing when you have a really, really talented defense, even if they aren't as fast as some of the vintage defenses, they've been able to play fast. And I think you've seen the defense the last few ball games do anything but that, let alone be lined up correctly all the time or know their assignment, the old assignment alignment discussion point. Can it be better and different? Can you play fast and free? We talk about Nebraska and the magnitude of this game Saturday night. What can be done with their pass rush, right? We talk about stopping the run if you're Nebraska, how important that is. That's incredible. But you look at where Nebraska's at, we'll get Rob's take on Nebraska's best five. Can you create some running room? I mean, you had Indiana's rush defense, at least against Cincy last year. They were pretty decent, obviously, more than decent, 1.3 per carry. So that is worth noting. That was impressive by Indiana. So I don't think the message is going to be lost by the team right now. And you heard Mickey say it in the video. You just want them to go out and hunt versus being hunted. Come out, be aggressive. It's one thing to say it. Can you get the kids to go do it? And I think they'll put an offensive game plan together to let it rip. Defensively, though, it really comes down to those guys being able to have some success. And can they pin their ears back and get after the quarterback? Can Garrett Nelson do it? That was a guy highlighted by Matt Millen through some technique or a second effort type deal. Caleb Tanner, really talented twitch athlete. Can he have a big ball game? Are they going to send him more off the edge? And, of course, O'Shawn Mathis, really talented kid Nebraska got in the portal. If Nebraska's going to win Saturday night, one of those three have to make a huge impact. I know I've named a third of the defense, okay? But one of the edge guys has to be big, not just in setting the edge, but how about getting after the quarterback and causing some problems on third down? Easier said than done. With that, the way Nebraska's played this year, but it's been an emphasis for sure this week in practice.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit ago when you talked about playing fast. That's what Matt Millen said. Now, I think a lot of Husker fans have noticed that this season. This team doesn't look fast on defense, and I want to bring something up because you said it, and I want to dive a little further into it, where you said it's not a defense that plays fast. And there is a difference between an athlete, a football player, being fast and playing fast. I think the perfect representation of this is if you think back to the Seahawks Legion of Boom defense as a defense that played fast, right?
Oh, that whole secondary knew what the other was doing, trusted what the other was doing, and they flew. Plus, you had Wagner in the middle.
And for what it's worth, you only had one guy in that entire defense that ran a 40 that was in the 4.4s. Everyone else was above a 4.40. You wouldn't have ever known it based on how they played, though. I mean, Earl Thomas was the only guy in that defense. He ran a 4.43. You had Richard Sherman, he ran a 4.56 at the combine. Cam Chancellor ran a 4.69. That's slow for the NFL, 4.69 playing safety. But that defense never
then
once...
he hit you and you didn't get up.
The defense never once looked slow, though. They were quick to react. They were quick flowing to the football. There's a difference between being fast and playing fast. I think that's what some of the simplification is from Bill Busch. It's allowing this defense less thinking, more reacting, more playing football, gives you that ability to play fast. And that's why I think there is some hope on what Bill Busch can bring to this defense. I think there are some slight issues within this team in terms of you don't have the same athletes you had in your defense last season.
Well, depth's a problem, too.
But I look at a guy last year like Cam Taylor-Britt or the two safeties. You don't necessarily have guys that are better athletes than those guys, but they're playing slower than those guys.
Well, you had the experience
that's the big problem.
of 2 years, 2.5, 3 years starting at safety.
Allows you to play fast.
Sure. And then Cam Taylor-Britt, I mean, he was playing either at safety or at corner through his 4 years in Lincoln. Trev Alberts had the breakfast this morning, Big Red Breakfast. That was part of the World Herald. And Trev laid out the ultimate problem solver is with 3 letters, W-I-N. Not N-I-L. That's me saying not N-I-L, but W-I-N. And he spoke to a number of Husker fans, and what Nebraska needs is premier development. Be that in the Midwest, you have it up the road in Minnesota, you have it across the river in Iowa, you have it down south in Lawrence. Okay, Nebraska's got to get back to that. So we're not talking about, okay, what's the 2 deep look like? And is there about anybody on the 2 deep that can come in and spell and not have a drop-off? Right now, Nebraska's been struggling with that. And quite honestly, you're searching for your best 5 on the offensive line. I get it, and I get it that you're still doing it at this point. And we've not seen or heard a lot of the backups, right? Because this is who you're riding with to this point with your tackles. And you feel bad that the tackles have had the roller coaster they have because they've been highly rated recruits, first and foremost. Secondly, it's not like they're not trying, okay? But you've had a guy like Corcoran that's gone right tackle, guard. Now he's got to get back out to left tackle. That's 3 positions. You've had flip-flopping going on. And then there's Benhart, who looked decent initially, and then he's trying to kind of find – I swear to you, that poor guy's dealing with confidence issues, but there's no one behind him you're comfortable enough to replace him with. I mean, out of the Hunter Anthony choices or the Bankses, right? I mean, both those guys have been in the program. Hunter not so long, but Banks has been in the program a while. Neither of those guys are getting a look versus what you have out there, because clearly Nebraska feels their best chance right now is with those guys that are penciled in that starting 5.
And this might have to be a topic for our next little segment to close out the hour, but you mentioned Trev's comment that Nebraska needs to be one of the premier development programs in the country. What programs do you think right now are your premier development programs in the country? I think of Iowa, as you said.
Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
I can add Utah on there as well, I think.
Fair.
I mean, Utah goes and they fill holes in the transfer portal, but for the most part, they develop their guys. And elsewhere in the Big Ten, it's not top of mind, but can you throw Michigan in there with what they've done under Harbaugh? It's not like they've been recruiting to a level that you would think, yeah, this team's going to get you to the college football playoff.
They've been top 3 about every recruiting ranking.
Top 3 in the Big Ten, but you wouldn't necessarily think of them as being a team that's going to be a national title contender.
They've had their years. Early on, they were top 5, top 10, and they were teens, but they've kind of gone away from the stargazing. And the thing that is crazy about Michigan is they have 18, 50-year seniors that are playing ball. They haven't had attrition. They've had guys stay in the program and get better, and they've found a couple of quarterbacks. We'll wind down hour 1 next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Gary Barnett and Rob Zatechka with us to talk some Nebraska, Indiana. Hail Varsity presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. You're looking for tickets Saturday night to Indiana, Nebraska. How about Husker Volleyball? Or you're trying to deal some tickets. How about Red Zone tickets? Selling fun since 2001. They can take care of you. Tickets to all types of events. That's Husker football and volleyball. NFL action, Creighton basketball, concerts, theater choices, and, of course, the College World Series. RedZoneTickets.com. They're great folks. They're local in Omaha. They're reliable. They're local. An A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. And they have a 100% guarantee on all their orders. You'll receive authentic tickets and experience the joy you'll never forget. Get that item crossed off your bucket list. Create the memories that do last a lifetime. RedZoneTickets.com. Log on today. That's RedZoneTickets.com. So we're diving into a little bit of what Trev had to say this morning. And email in from Austin to the Lane Kiffin. We played a little bit of Lane yesterday, whining about the crowd. And you could shoot a cannon through the student section. So Austin says, Elijah, and he loves Ole Miss too much. Quit poo-pooing Lane Kiffin, Elijah. I think Lane's just working on a raise, baby. That's what I'm saying.
I'm kind of with you.
I mean, I think he's working on a raise, and he ain't going to be at Ole Miss for forever.
I mean, and don't get me wrong here. If Nebraska goes and hires Lane Kiffin, okay, cool. I'll get behind it. I like Lane Kiffin. He's honestly one of my top 5 favorite coaches in college football right now. He's always entertaining. He's got a fun brand of offense, and it's fun to watch Ole Miss be good again because I do have a soft spot in my heart for them. I love Lane Kiffin. My take is just culture-wise, I mean, that was one of the big things Trev laid out in his presser when he let Frost go. Culture-wise, Lane Kiffin, I do not believe to be a fit in Lincoln, Nebraska.
I just think he's different. He doesn't seem to me as a builder. Not that he hasn't done nice work at Ole Miss, right? But I think you freeze, whatever you think of you, left some talent there. Okay, and listen, Lane does a good job, and Lane's grown up a lot, and Lane's super good offensively, and they're pretty talented. They've always had some pass rushers there too, right?
What I'll say is I really do believe Lane's done a great job building Ole Miss. Gets the most out of his talent. 100%. If you go watch an Ole Miss game, he gets the most out of his talent. Can he handle the pressure and expectations of a place like Nebraska, A? And then B, can he recruit somewhere where it's not his home territory? The South is Lane Kiffin's home territory.
That's where he's been at Bama, he's been at Florida Atlantic. How big, Nebraska is going to be a big build, right? And that's the question. What type of construction management ace are you going to get, or do you have already, to make that a reality for Nebraska here moving forward in 2023? Who do you have?
Pete again.
Pete, we're going to squeeze you in here. We lost you. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good, thanks.
I really think we're going to find a little different defensive philosophy. I think Bush will not sit back in a cover 2 all game long and let them pick us apart. I think he'll probably put the linebacker on the line of scrimmage and try to put some heat on the quarterback. The other thing on offense in this game, I really think what quarterback can run the zone read or gain positive yards running will make the difference. And the other thing, the last thing, is don't forget about Jerry Kill. He checks all the boxes of what Trev was talking about.
Hey, Pete, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it. Jerry Kill is back in coaching. He's at New Mexico State. That's a name we haven't had. Hour 2, Rob Zatechka on the way.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. We welcome in Husker Hall of Famer, NFLer. And we say hi to Dr. Rob Zatechka as we're going to talk some Nebraska, Indiana, some Big Red football. Dr. Rob, how's the day, man? What's up?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing? I'm sitting in my backyard enjoying the weather.
You're enjoying a hazy IPA too, I believe.
How'd you know that, actually? I'm actually drinking a Voodoo Ranger from New Belgium.
There it is. There it is. No, I just guessed. I mean, the weather's been incredible, man.
Oh, my God. It's finally fall. Well, I hope it is. I still always worry about we're going to have like that one last dying gasp of summer 90-degree week that always hits. But
no,
I hope not.
You get the humidity, but you guys never wore sleeves anyway, so it's all good.
I don't know. Rob strikes me as a hoodie and shorts kind of guy now.
Yeah.
Am I wrong there? Am I off base?
He may harm you.
What? I'm kind of that way, but it's like I go hoodie and shorts like to the end of November.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
It's about when.
Yeah, snow on the ground. I might put jeans on.
There you go. Well, let's dive in here, Dr. Rob, and give me your feel. What's What's your feel here for Saturday night? Indiana, we were talking earlier, hour one, quite a bit of crossroads for Nebraska for sure, but Indiana is off to a really good start in some tight games, but the night game in Lincoln is not an easy place, despite what the records have said. So what's the Dr. Robo-meter at heading into this one?
It's going to be interesting. I think you and I talked once before the season started, and I had commented that I don't know if I've ever gone into a football season more unsure of what product we were actually going to see on the field. And sadly, I think we're even more into that thinking right now, because when you think about the changes that have gone through in Lincoln, you had the season start, you realized, wow, this is not working. It's whatever the changes were in the offseason, the new offensive coaching staffs, the new scheme on offense, it's not working. And you saw that day one, especially, on the defensive side of the ball against Northwestern. We realize now Northwestern wasn't a very good team. North Dakota, an FCS team, took us really deep into the fourth quarter. You got the game against Georgia Southern was an utter disaster. Oklahoma was an even bigger disaster. Scott Frost has been fired. The week after that, Shenander gets fired. You're now to the point where every week there's kind of this sort of hit the reset button. It's like you lose to Georgia Southern, hit the reset button, you make some changes. We're going to have to wait a week to see what that brings. You play the Oklahoma game, Shenander gets fired. Hit the reset button. You got a couple of weeks of with the bye week. So we're kind of every game here for the last 3 games has been this complete and utter, well, let's hit the reset button and see what happens. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to know what we're going to see here until they get out on the field. Now, that being said, Indiana's got some athletes. They're not a great team. Quite frankly, I don't think they're a very good team at all. But I think they can move the ball offensively when you look at what they've done the previous few weeks here. They've shown a capability of being able to move the ball, especially through the air. They don't have much of a ground game, and so if Nebraska can dedicate at least whatever they've got on defense to stopping the pass, I think you end up stopping Indiana because they're not going to beat you with the run game. Now, the problem with that is when you look at a game like Georgia Southern, Nebraska's been very susceptible to the pass, and so that's something I really worry about. But if Bill Busch can make some changes here on defense and kind of get a little bit of a better pass protection going here on the defensive side of the ball, pass defense going rather, I think they could do something and maybe do a little bit of damage. I can't emphasize enough, this is not a good football team in Lincoln right now, and I feel bad for Mickey being in the situation that he's in, given the circumstances, just because it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Well, yeah, bottom line is I've got some hopes defensively for some changes with the bye week, but the big bottom line is, man, we don't know.
Well, Rob, we had Evan Bland on the show yesterday, and he made the interesting comment that right now with Indiana, it almost looks like a mirror image of this Husker football team with an offense that can move the ball with success, a defense that is suspect, to put it nicely, and for the most part, just underwhelming results. Good athletes, but not necessarily a good football team, which kind of mirrors what you just said with us right now. And the big difference has been Indiana has shown in recent weeks that they can win a close football game. Nebraska is still yet to show that they can get it done in a one-score football game. And if it comes down to that on Saturday, a one-score football game, do you think that Mickey Joseph and a renewed energy around this team is enough to get Nebraska over the hump, or is it alarm bells going off for you if it's a close game down the stretch?
Well, it's both. There's always going to be those alarm bells because you've got a team that has not shown an ability to win in close games. But you talked about the energy that Mickey brings, and I think that's where you get some changes, and I really kind of start to wonder if, that's what I hope for with Mickey, because, is it one of these things where is he going to realistically have a shot at the head job? I don't know. But I think to be able to do that, to do the best that he can do, he's got to be able to change the mentality of this team and reverse some of these, I guess what I perceive to be some psychological blocks where they get in a close game and do, in fact, have trouble pulling those out.
Rob Zatechka with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Of course, Rob with Travis Justice, their podcast, Husker Doc Talk. Be sure to check that out on your favorite platform at Doc Talk Sports, where you can follow Dr. Rob Zatechka, part of the Pipeline, Husker Hall of Famer. Rob, Trev's doing a national search. It's got to be attention to detail, culture building. I mean, Trev's laid out kind of what he wants in a candidate. Who do you like that's out there? And, what do you think the gettable part of that equation is for Nebraska? You were there and won championships, but nationally, I think Nebraska is not completely side-eyed, but it's just in a way different place than when you were down there.
It is. I mean, in terms of the gettable, there's some pretty good reasons to be optimistic there. And the reason I say that is you still have great infrastructure. Mm-hmm. You've got great facilities. You've got very, very good athletic department and university administrative support. You have an interested fan base that really wants to see success. I mean, there's a lot of schools. I mean, you saw I know everybody said, Lane Kiffin's coming to Nebraska, but you saw Lane Kiffin complaining about fans in the stands. I mean, it's the best Ole Miss has looked since Eli Manning's been there, and they still can't put people in the seats. What's the line? It's the biggest cocktail party on the planet before games there, whatever the line is at Ole Miss as far as tailgating goes. Everybody stays in the parking lots and tailgates. Nobody actually goes in to watch the game. That's kind of disappointing. Nebraska's not like that. If you've got almost 10 years of really bad football. You've got 20 years of pretty mediocre football. I really don't want to knock down what Pelini did too much. I mean, in hindsight, everybody's looking back on, Bo was pretty damn good. We just didn't like the emotional stuff on the sideline. But we got 20 years of pretty crappy product on the field, and we're still packing the place. I mean, sellout, no sellout. I mean, you can argue it's like, well, the sellout's not really real because you get corporate buy-ups, et cetera. Bottom line is they're still putting 70 or 80,000 people in that damn stadium every Saturday to watch crappy football. And there's something to be said for that if you're a coach coming in and looking at a program in terms of how viable can I build this. You want great fan support, and you're always going to have that here. In terms of who I like or who I see getting, I mean, there's kind of the names that have always been thrown out there.
Is there a favorite of those names, though? I like Aranda. I don't know that he's gettable. I think I love Lance. I really like what KU's doing.
I do. My only, everybody's got a downside for me. I mean, I love Campbell at Iowa State, but I mean, he's one of those, he'll knock off Oklahoma and Texas and then lose to a bad KU team. You've got Leipold. He knows Nebraska. He's worked in the state. He's a great program builder. Are his defenses going to work in the Big Ten? They seem a little bend but don't break. To me, I mean, I think he's a great coach. It's just, is that defense going to fly? You look at Kleiman. I think, again, kind of a little guy who's trying to be a program builder at K-State. I've seen him. I feel like he's kind of hitting a little bit of a ceiling there. Mm-hmm. I know he's got Martinez down there. There's high hopes after knocking off Oklahoma in Norman. I don't want to minimize that. I'll be really curious to see how they go. Is the Tulane game going to be a fluke? Or are they still going to be a little bit inconsistent? Mm-hmm. I keep coming back to Jeff Monken at Army.
Okay.
And you got a guy who's done very, very well with some amazingly tough restrictions on who you can bring in as far as athletes and recruits go. And, don't get me wrong, the service academies really like to win at sports. Mm-hmm. They really do. They're going to put some emphasis on that. And I know they love Jeff Monken up there at West Point. It'll be interesting to me that I think he's a guy that might be hard to get. Mm-hmm. I mean, I almost think some of these other candidates that we've talked about just now might be the easier candidates. Now, we throw these names out there. These are the names that most people are going to because we see them around us. It's some of these Big 12 schools that are just down the road, so to speak. You got a Rand and Baylor, but he's got the Wisconsin background. We kind of know the guy a little bit. My suspicion is, and I could be wrong, all of this is complete guesswork. My suspicion is we're going to be battering around these names, and then when Trev actually hires somebody, everybody's going to be like, never thought of that guy. Maybe he'll bring, I don't know, maybe he'll bring Chris Peterson out of retirement. I mean, that'd be an absolute pipe dream in my mind. Chris isn't the youngest guy on the planet. But you got a guy who's kind of done everything except maybe win a national title. I mean, he's won big games. He's won BCS bowl games. He's won. He's won at the Power 5 level. He took Washington to the playoffs. He's won Power 5 conference championships. You've got a guy who's done literally everything except a national title. That, I mean, technically is available. I just don't know if he's willing to come out of retirement and try and do a rebuild job at Nebraska right now.
Rob, while we're on maybe what could be considered a pipe dream, we got about 2 minutes left here this segment. If you could appoint a current Big Ten head coach to the Nebraska spot, I know that's pipe dream. This is all theoretical, but Ryan Day. Well, okay. That's easy.
Ryan Day.
That was easy.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get a really, really good coach who knows how to recruit and knows how to coach and win lots of football games.
But would that work at a place like Nebraska? He's not a proven program builder, and recruiting to Ohio State, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not the hardest gig in the world.
He's not wrecked the Ferrari.
Yeah, but I mean, that has its own challenges. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, dude, they handed the keys of a Ferrari to Frank Solich. Now, he didn't wreck it. He just drove it really slow in the passing lane and pissed everybody off. But he was a pretty darn good coach.
Yes.
It's one of those things where I think that has its own challenges. I mean, think of the number of really, really great programs where the guy who built it or the guy who really turned it into something retires and it just slowly fades. I mean, Bear Bryant at Alabama, I mean, God, it was a disaster there until Gene Stallings hit the door again. Then it was a disaster for a while again until they got Nick Saban in town. I mean, just because the program's not a Ferrari doesn't mean Ryan Day wouldn't be able to do something with it. The fact that he took Ohio State and has continued to keep them at a very high level says something. I mean, it's getting to the mountaintop's hard. Staying on the mountaintop, I think, is even harder to do.
Rob Zatechka with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Dr. Rob Zatechka, Husker Hall of Famer. And, of course, podcast, Doc Talk with Travis Justice. Find that, check that out where you visit to your platforms for podcasts. Dr. Rob, we'll bump into you again. You're awesome. Thanks for a few minutes today, and enjoy that IPA, my friend.
That's gone now.
Okay.
I'm going to go get another one.
You do. Interview done. I am thirsty. Rob, you take care, bud. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
You guys have a great afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
There he is. Just perfect timing. His beer's gone, and he's off to the fridge for another. We got to pour him a beer at the Hail Varsity Club next time. He came in our kickoff show in August. It was great. Thought he was going to throw me through the window when I asked him about his fanny pack from the early 90s.
I tell you what, he still looks like he could hop on the offensive line today.
Yep, Dr. Rob can play ball. So there is thoughts from Husker standout Rob Zatechka. We'll switch gears, get a coach's perspective. Coach Gary Barnett with us. Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Some college football thoughts with Gary Barnett, head coach at Colorado and Northwestern. Coach, another weekend of ball here. September's about to turn into October. How you doing?
Well, Chris, we're living in the same kind of world right now. I call it football hell. We're struggling here in Colorado. There's been some great games, though. It's been a great fall, I think, for college football. It's just not so much for Colorado, not so much for Nebraska. I'm glad everybody else is having a great time.
Can Nebraska and Colorado get something on the books? Can they play each other this year, and would anybody win?
Well, right now in the bottom 10, the worst team is Colorado State, and the second worst team is Colorado. We're trying to get a matchup, maybe on a Wednesday afternoon at the Boulder High School parking lot. So one of us will get a win.
Man, well, Nebraska has Indiana. I think Mickey and Coach Bush have tried to regroup the kids. Obviously, Chenander's no longer there. We've touched on Frost's dismissal. I wanted to get your take here on Indiana. Coach Allen's done a really good job. I know they are coming off 2-10, but man, he did a fabulous job during the COVID season, and he's worked his way up to this opportunity, and man, he has a lot of passion. That's one big time quality about Allen, and Indiana's just kind of been knocking on that door. I know they've lost some players, and I know they lost DeBoer, but overall, they've been a pretty physical football team under Allen.
They have, and they've had good coaches go through there as well. And as you said, Kalen DeBoer, and of course he picked up Penix, who was great for him in the COVID year, and now he's looking like a Heisman guy out at Washington. So they put together just a solid program where for years you never knew what you're going to get with Indiana, but solid wasn't the word you'd use. And so they're solid. They've won 3 of their last 5, and the 2 losses for Cincinnati and Purdue, which is that you don't apologize for those. And right now they're solid. You look at the 2 teams, Nebraska and Indiana, they're very close in all their numbers. You look at this game and you go, you probably think that Allen's going to win because he's got an established staff. You got Mickey Joseph, who's an interim, fired the defensive coordinator, the head coach is gone. So you just wonder about the mental approach that the kids are going to take, the players are going to take going into this game, just how hungry they are or how hungry Mickey can make them. So it's going to come down to how you play. I mean, the players are the same, and whether you got good players or not so good players, it still comes down to how you play on the weekend, not how good a player you were going into it. It's how good you were that day. So that's what you're going to judge them on, is how they play that day.
Coach, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Nebraska job, and Mickey said it this week. Look, my interviews are every game, right? But the Nebraska job overall, is its attractiveness inflated from a lot of us that live here because of what we've known? From the outside looking in, is it, oh man, it's Nebraska, or it's not what Nebraska was? What's your take on the reputation?
Well, we've both got the same sort of questions that we ask and our fans ask. It's very similar. You look at Boulder, and everybody that lives in Boulder and has ever visited Boulder goes, good grief, how can you not recruit there? Well, we haven't. and you look at Nebraska and you look at the resources and the fan base and the history, and you go, how can you not recruit there? And things have changed. Times have changed, and nothing stays the same. And it's so true in both of our programs. If I were to compare the 2 programs, and somebody else asked me to compare Nebraska to someplace else, I can't remember where it was, but Nebraska, I think it still has, as a football coach, looking at it, it still has the things that I would want in a program, and that is the fan base, a passionate fan base, support, a great stadium, you got a great conference. Those kinds of things, I think, are more suited to adapt to the new football world than perhaps what we have here. And so I still think it's a good job. You got to figure out the recruiting piece of it. The portal is always now going to be a big issue to everybody, and it's a game changer. It changes everything. And so your coaches have to recruit constantly your own players. You know, I think when you think about it, UCLA and USC coming into the Big Ten is certainly going to help you land folks from California that probably you haven't been able to do since you've been in the Big Ten. And I'm sure you have them. And, Adrian Martinez is a perfect example. But not like you used to be able to go to California and get, or Texas and get. Sure. You know, Texas is the one that you really lost more than anything else. But it's still, I think, what a football coach looks for in a job. And, I think if it's the right guy and stars are all working right, then you're going to be able to keep players there. But it's going to come down to, you're going to have to pay them something to stay. Can you provide that? I guess as you can. Once everybody gets past the fact that you feel like you're making a deal with the devil in order to do it. But you're going to have to do that. And so it's going to have to be the right guy. It's going to have to be the right, kind of assistant coaches, and probably more younger guys than older guys. You're going to have a few older guys because they bring knowledge of the game. And then you're going to have to have a few young guys because they're going to have to be able to recruit. So
that's the combo.
Very similar situations.
Well, and you got to get somebody that knows the Big Ten. And I look at the KU job because Lance's names continued to gain some steam this week. Leipold. Could Lance turn Kansas into a gig and a program? We know about basketball coach Barnett, but could Lance Leipold at Kansas, as good as he's doing, stack several seasons there to make them attractive to be plucked out of the Big 12?
Well, I think with basketball,
they're definitely one. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly makes you more attractive. But yeah, he could do that. I mean, Kansas is a good university. It could fit into the Big Ten. The beauty of Lance Leipold is just like the beauty of Chris Kleiman. They bring a very successful staff. They're not putting a bunch of guys together. They're bringing guys who have a system, have done it, and stayed together. And half of the issues you have with a new staff are personal issues and things like that. You don't have that when you bring a staff like Lance did. So, and he's, the good thing is he's done it with somebody else's players who nobody wanted. And so now he's going to get a chance to add to his bundle of players by his own recruiting based on the success that he's having. So, yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility, no question.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, going to hit some rapid fire, but first, real quick, what did you think of Adrian against Oklahoma?
Well, it was, I do a show in Kansas City, and they kept saying, we're waiting for Adrian. He's holding back. I said, listen, when he bursts on that scene, you're going to love him. And I said, he's a heck of a football player. And he just broke out that day and was the total difference maker in that football game. And he played like we've seen him play at Nebraska. So, yeah, it was a great game for him, a great game for K-State.
That was a big time.
The Big 12 right now, Chris, the Big 12 right now is, you look at any one of those teams in the Big 12 and they can win the conference. Top to bottom, every single team's good enough to do it. So, interesting.
There's a lot of time. Big 12 is really a solid league this year. I mean, it's playing really good football, and there are no off weekends. You're just super right about that. SEC.
And look at the teams that they're going to bring in. They're all playing really well.
Yeah.
So, what looked like a league that was dead is going to be pushing the other two big guys.
No, they will be. Coach, you've been right about Minnesota, too, man. They were just something fierce, and they look really poised in the West. I want to talk SEC. What do you like this weekend here? Kentucky or Ole Miss? Ole Miss -7.
Yeah, gosh darn it, Kentucky's just been so solid. I've been so impressed with the way they played the whole year so far. Ole Miss, I'm probably leaning more towards favoring Stoops over Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. But, I think I take Kentucky in the points. I'm not sure they're going to win, but it's at Ole Miss, tough place to play. But I like Kentucky, and I like the way they play.
Clemson, what a ball game at Wake, man. They found a way, a lot of points. Here comes NC State. Clemson's favored by 6.5. Can Clemson do it again? This time they're at home.
Yeah, I know. And NC State's just good enough to beat them. And I think I'd take NC State in the points, but
okay.
I think Clemson probably wins it by just a hair.
Baylor, Okie State here. Oranda, what a win in Ames. Baylor -2. Okie State comes to town with the mullet.
Yeah, I know, boy. This is a great football game, one of the best of the weekend. I think Okie State's primed to make the move on Baylor, so I'm going to go with Okie State.
Okay. You're getting 4.5 points in your Indiana under the lights at Memorial Stadium. I would take the points. I may have Mama take the points.
Well, it dropped. It started at 5.5.
I know.
So,
we can't figure that out.
Well, it's the crowd. Picking Nebraska and Colorado right now are really difficult. I got to go with Indiana.
That's a no.
And the stability of the program.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get it. Totally get it. And just for giggles here, Bama and Arkansas, -17, Bama on the road. Woo, pig suey.
I take Arkansas on the points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll win, but I'll take the points.
Gary Barnett with us. Coach, enjoy your Pac-12 After Dark in Arizona, because you guys are at the Wildcats, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll call you about 4 a.m. when I get home and just see if you watched it, okay?
I'll be up.
All right, bud.
Take care, Coach.
Talk to you, Chris. Bye-bye.
There he is, head coach for a while at Northwestern in Colorado, and he is doing Pac-12 After Dark at Arizona. So good to hear from Coach Barney. VSiN Sports Network's Danny Burke with us here. Next segment. One of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances if you drink, don't drive? A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Danny Burke on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Danny Burke with us, Burke's Best Bets. VSiN Sports Network at Danny Burke 5. Danny, you got some winners in your back pocket.
I'm hoping that I do. We're just hoping we can at least see a winner out of Nebraska this week, and that's kind of the big thing. Once we get that out of the way, then we can all cruise simultaneously, I'm hoping.
Let's dive into Nebraska right now. The line at -5, Big Red favorite. Indiana, man, off to a really good start at 3-1. They have a win over Illinois. They've won some close ball games. Cincinnati was a little bit too much for them, but how do you see this one shaping up here with the total and the line?
Man, I hate that I like Nebraska in this spot because I really don't want to touch anything with Nebraska for probably the remainder of my life, but especially this season. But, guys, I just don't see how this isn't a good spot for the Huskers. You get a week to recollect everything with the new coaching staff. Chenander's gone, thank the Lord. You know that now Mickey Joseph's kind of got an extra week under his belt to get all the boys settled, to kind of get the scheme that they want and more ample time to prepare for a team like Indiana that, let's be honest, they're really not as good as their record is showing at 3-1. Defensively, I'm still concerned with Nebraska. There's no denying that. But the offense for the Huskers should be the difference maker here, and what should be the difference maker for every game with them. So I would consider maybe a first-half angle with Nebraska if you get them 3 or lower, assuming they come out firing after all the nonsense that's occurred. I would still lay anything with them under a touchdown. Honestly, if you can't beat Indiana by a touchdown, well, what the hell is this program doing at this point? And you can say that regardless, but come on, the Hoosiers. And the best angle that I'll probably end up doing, guys, is just waiting for an in-game number that's going to be better. Nebraska will find a way to win this game, but it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly. They'll probably be trailing at some point, at many points, and you'll get a better number on the Huskers, which 9 times out of 10 you typically do, and then you could jump in on Nebraska, maybe money line it at an affordable price, and then just hope that they can pull it out in some kind of fashion.
Danny Burke is with us here at Burke's Best Bets on Hail Varsity Radio. And Danny, with 2 of the worst defenses in the country, Nebraska and Indiana, are you looking at the over on, I think it's 61 points right now?
You know, it's a tough call. I mean, the total naturally is going to be inflated because of how bad Nebraska's defense is, and Indiana has been able to put up points. I mean, look, the totals are so dicey in college football. I never really touch them. And if I'm going to, I'm probably going to be betting more overs and unders just because of how sloppy these college games can be, especially down toward the wire. So, again, I wouldn't be rushing to bet the over. I guess that would be the only way I would lean because I'm expecting Nebraska should be able to put up at least 27 in this game, at least. And then if their defense does improve from the alteration, then maybe you can limit Indiana to at least like 20 or so. So then you're staying under at that point. But the big question is, what do you expect out of Nebraska's defense? If you think they're going to be the same old defense, bet the over. If you think they could be an improvement, stay away or bet the under. So that's really how you got to look at it. It all comes down to the Huskers' defense.
Danny Burke is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Danny, let's move to some NFL action. But before we get to tonight's Thursday night football game between the Bengals and the Dolphins, let's look at some of the interesting games on Sunday. And I'm going to start this off with the morning kickoff, Sunday morning football from London, England. The Vikings and the Saints going at it. It looks like the Vikings are a 2.5-point favorite.
This game is very, very tough, not just because it's international, but because the Saints have a ginormous question mark on their team right now. And that's how I attributed them in the offseason, too. Like, the Saints have a lot of talent, but they're such a question mark of a team because of Jameis Winston. And you've really seen him struggle so much. Now there's, the conversation of if he's going to continue to be the starter. We know that he should be the starter for this weekend against the Vikings. So it just makes it really tough because New Orleans still has a very talented roster, and the Vikings still have the bad blood of being the Vikings and losing games they shouldn't. They beat the Lions in a game they probably should have lost. But I love Minnesota this year. I love them coming into the year. I love their offense. I like Kevin O'Connell a lot. So if you still have a lot of high hopes for Minnesota, and trust me, I do. It's just I'm not as high on them because of the ugly fashion of how they played Detroit. But under a field goal, Minnesota seems like the right move. Dalvin Cook should be playing in this game, and even if he wasn't, Madison can get the ball going. And Alvin Kamara just hasn't looked that great. I know he's got all his off-field issues that could be a distraction, but offensively, Minnesota should have the huge advantage. It's just, is Minnesota's defense going to finally make the Saints' offense look competent? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're under the key number of 3, I would have to lean Minnesota. Ultimately, I'm not touching it. As for the total, I'd probably look a little to the under. But again, not as much conviction there. It would be Minnesota as my top play, but I haven't touched anything yet.
Bucks, Chiefs, where do you go here? It's going to be in Minneapolis. The Hurricanes been a nightmare. And you have both teams trying to get on track here. Kansas City shocked last week. Tampa was really stagnant offensively as well.
Here's the thing, going into this line and looking at it, it's really been unique how it's moved. So it's naturally going to be a big overreaction because of the Bucs losing in such an ugly offensive fashion last week. But let's not forget they were playing with a bunch of third stringers, and they fumbled the ball twice on drives they probably should have scored on. You still have the best defense in the NFL in Tampa Bay. Kansas City's coming off a loss, so be it. It happens. That was a high desperation spot for the Colts. I liked Kansas City originally, and they went up to 2.5, but now it's come back down to virtually a pick-em. So that late steam is getting me to think more about Tampa Bay because you got Mike Evans coming back. Chris Godwin is questionable, I think last I saw. Maybe he does play. Sunday Night Football, these teams have history between each other. I know Tom Brady's going to be ticked off coming off that loss against the Packers, and now you're in prime time once again. I am starting to lean a little bit more toward Tampa Bay. Again, I haven't played this, especially because it's the Sunday night game and you want to see where this line marinates. Heck, maybe it goes back to the Chiefs and you can even get a teaser spot with the Bucs if they're catching points. But I also don't hate the idea of betting the under. Again, this Buccaneers defense is outstanding. It's going to be the best unit on the field probably. And if depending on where they do end up going with this game officially, I know you said Minnesota. I thought it was still in Tampa for the time being, but if the weather did play an impact, then obviously you could assume this would be a lower scoring affair with all the wind and the rain being played into it. And even if Tom Brady does get some of his weapons back, the offense is still probably going to be a little bit on the slower end. And a lot of these primetime games have gone toward the under, so I would consider that angle too.
Danny, last game here before we get you out. Let's go Thursday night football. About 60 seconds left here. Dolphins and Bengals. The Bengals are a 3.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I laid 3 in the hook with Cincinnati, and I did that yesterday because most books had 4 and only one had 3.5. And usually I would buy down if I was laying 3 in the hook, buy it down to 3 if you can get it at like minus 120 or minus 125. And I know that's widely available now, so I would recommend that. Look, Cincinnati's in a good spot here. I mean, they finally got a win under their belt, and I know people are saying it was against the Jets, so who cares? But they needed that, and now they can get on a rhythm. For Miami, you're on a short week. You didn't get to do your normal schedule because of the hurricane. Tua's coming in with an injury. Jalen Waddle's coming in with an injury. It's Mike McDaniel's first primetime spot, and it probably should be a letdown spot because even though they're 3-0, it's kind of been a couple of wonky 3-0s. They got dominated by the Bills offensively, and it was a historic comeback against the Ravens. Cincinnati should win this game. I think they could win by 4 or more, so I would consider that. And I would also look at Joe Mixon. I bet him over 18.5 receiving yards, would play that up to 20.5. I'd explain a little bit more so why, but I know we're getting cut up here. So those are the 2 plays I got for tonight, fellas.
Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, at Danny Burke 5 on Twitter. Danny, we'll talk next week. Thanks for the time.
You got it, gentlemen. Have a good one.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes. Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Single Barrel tomorrow, road show in Lincoln in the Haymarket 4 to 6. We'll spend time with Jacob Padilla and, of course, Bill Dolman going to be with us. Brady Altman's also from Hail Varsity, so Clausburn as well. So we'll have the forecast and get you ready. Nebraska, Indiana. Pregame also locally here out of Lincoln anyway, 3:30 to 5:30 at the Single Barrel as well on Saturday. So you're invited down. Get a steak, get a bourbon, get a beer, get a water. But enjoy. Should be a good road show tomorrow. Big thanks to Rob Zatechka, Husker Great. Good stuff from Coach Barnett, Danny Burke, and Brandon Vogel. We'll get to some more of your emails. Keep those coming, and we'll hit more of those tomorrow. And we'll see how the walkthrough goes for Nebraska as they get ready for Nebraska, Indiana. And the fan base, I think, it's sold out. That's a week-to-week thing, right? Day-to-day. Everyone's day-to-day if you ask Bill Belichick, but good effort Saturday night and a win. We'll do a ton here for a week from tomorrow where we'll be up at the Hail Varsity Club in La Vista getting ready for Nebraska Rutgers, taking you up till kickoff.
Schmidt, before we get out of here on this show, you want to hit a steak and a beer on Dolphins Bengals
I think
tonight?
So.
I think you need redemption.
That up. Listen to you.
I win 1 and I get all the confidence in the world.
You win 1. You got to win 6 in a more for us, six more in a row for us to be even.
You picked Monday, so I can pick tonight if you'd like me to, unless you got one that's really striking your fancy.
I don't know that it's going to be you pick. That's been it hadn't been my brains. It's not been my insight. It's been Lady Luck and go the other way against Elijah.
Okay.
That's how I've built my bankroll or my meat freezer.
Easy enough, then I'll take the Dolphins. They're +4 tonight. It was 3.5 whenever we talked to Danny like 10 minutes ago, and now I'm seeing on Twitter, late moving line, it's up to 4 now for the Bengals. So
I'll take Cincy and the points at home. Actually, hold on. I'm giving you points, aren't I?
That's what I'm saying. I think the Bengals win this, but I think they win it by a field goal.
Sure.
So
sure.
I like 4.
You want Miami in you want Miami in the points is what you're telling me.
I do want Miami in the points.
Tell me about the over under here because it's 49. I was an idiot and I picked the under Monday night. You know what? I think they go over.
So you want to take Miami I'll take Miami in the under if you want to take Miami in the over.
No, I'll take Cincinnati. I'll give you the points.
Okay.
And I'll take the over.
Okay.
And you will collect like Stewie on Family Guy with a baseball bat
Well, let's do some quick math here.
if I don't pay up at the Single Barrel tomorrow. Elijah loves Roadshow Fridays at the Single Barrel because if it was a steak and a beer, he's like, yeah, I want that steak and I want that beer.
Yeah, what's the most expensive beer you have?
You're going to pick everything on the menu and just say, yeah, I'll have that.
All right, well, the Dolphins will cover 4, and I think I like the over as well. But
Big Joe Burrow game. Joey walked into the locker room with something unique on. It was not a normal suit or sport coat. It was some sort of fashion deal. But hey, he can pull it off. Cincy, tough luck 1-2. Miami might be a charming 3-0. Back at you from the Single Barrel Roadshow Friday tomorrow with Hail Varsity. See ya.